And let's finish the 10th chapter of The Cockatrice Boys by Joan Aiken. "But, sir," Sana said to the Archbishop later when they happened to be alone together. "Yes, my child? What has all this been about? Who was Auntie Floss really? And Tom Flint, why did he snatch me? And who was with him? And what did they have to do with the monsters? And what was the book that Auntie Floss kept nagging at me to go and fetch? Why couldn't she get it, if she could get all the way from Manchester to Scotland? And what was that awful voice? The one that said unloose the tempest? The one Tom Flint called master? Who was he?" Sana's voice wobbled a little. Some of the memories were still hard to face. Dr. Wren considered. He said, "You know that always, from the very beginning of life as we know it, there has been a continual non-stop conflict. There has been a continual non-stop conflict between good and evil, the forces that we call good and evil." "Has there?" asked Sana doubtfully. "Of course there has. The whole universe is balanced between pairs of opposites, good and evil, night and day, up and down, winter and summer, and on the whole the state of equilibrium is maintained. But every now and then one side weighs heavier than the other. Things begin to tilt, more often in the direction of down, of darkness. Chaos encroaches. It's what we call the sleep of reason. Society begins to crumble." "Wait, stop. What's the sleep of reason?" "It is what happens when the level of wickedness in several people's minds begins to combine together and forms a force that can, temporarily at least, overcome the forces of honor and good sense and law. What, for instance, caused the hole in the ozone layer? It was greed and stupidity, a rush to make profits before the dangers of new industrial processes had been thoroughly explained. So, what resulted? Monsters found their way in." But someone sent the monsters. Who did that? Why?" "It was the total sum of all that greed and wickedness in people's minds. We gave it a name. We call it Satan, the Prince of Dark. Human beings who surrender totally to this force may become temporarily endowed with superhuman attributes, but only temporarily. Like Mrs. Monsoon, like Tom Flint. It was borrowed power, soon spent." "Why did they want that book? Why did they want me to fetch it?" "Every few generations," said Dr. Wren, "there will be a born human intelligence far in advance of his time. Plato, Galileo, Leonardo. Of this kind was Michael Scott. It is thought he anticipated Einstein, that he discovered nuclear physics, a parallel universe, and also terrible ways in which one human group might wreak havoc on another. Such a book in the wrong hands might lead to unutterable devastation. His secrets are safer forgotten until human society has progressed far enough to be able to use them unselfishly, for the good of the whole universe." "But," said Sana, still thinking of Aunt Floss, "why couldn't they get the book themselves if they had all that power?" "There had to be a human instrument who could understand and serve this purpose. You were the choice of the higher powers, the Dark Angels, perhaps because you were Michael Scott's descendant, and may have mental abilities of which you are still unaware. Aunt Floss was too old and crazy. Flint too untrustworthy. They were soon discarded, but you were young, with unknown potential." Sana found that she did not wish to think about this suggestion. She said, "Will there always be good and evil, sir?" "So far as we can hypothesize, but they may be on different levels, ones that we can only guess at." Sana shivered. The prospect of this eternal struggle was daunting and tiring. Yuli laid his head on her knee and sighed deeply, and she rubbed his bristly brows. Dr. Wren looked at her with sympathy. She had, he thought, probably a long, unguessed-at course ahead of her, a hard way, very likely a dangerous one. "But your cousin Dyken will help you," he murmured half to himself. "When is King Edward's Day?" Sana inquired after a moment or two. "It is today. On it there is a powerful conjunction of occult planetary forces. When our opponents should have reached their highest peak of strength, from now on their power will dwindle. I think we can hope for a period of peace and quiet," he smiled, "until they are ready to make another attack. But by that time, you and I may well be in our graves. Somebody else will have the job of fighting them off." "Well, thank goodness for that," said Sana, yawning. "Who was King Edward?" "An obscure Scandinavian monarch, with a talent for astronomy. But Sana had fallen asleep with her head resting on Yuli's shaggy brow. Colonel Clipspeak said to Aiken, "My boy, you did well, very well, and I am bound to say that Sergeant Bellswinger always spoke highly of your work. I am going to promote you to ensign, with automatic advance to sub-lieutenant at the end of 18 months. Can I go on playing my drums, sir? Sub-lieutenants do not usually play drums. I wouldn't want to leave off doing that, sir. Well, if we are stationed in London, you may go to regimental music school. Now, can you send Miss Sana to me? She's asleep, sir. Well, when she wakes." When the monstrous lump that had been Tom Flint was hoisted up, it had to be done with heavy lifting tackle. The shape flew apart into an uncountable number of lumps, no bigger than pieces of fudge. These were all shoveled off the train and dumped along the rail track. "Just what was needed for the repair of the permanent way," said Ensign Pomfret cheerfully. When the next day dawned, it could be seen that the landscape around Dollar was littered with wreckage and thousands of dead monsters. "Oh, why did there have to be battles?" sighed Sana, making her way to the colonel's cabin. She had slept for 14 hours after having been carried to her bunk by Aiken and Mrs. Churt. The colonel said to her, "My dear Miss Sana, now that you have had a good night's sleep and are feeling, I hope, rather more the thing, I would be much obliged if you could raise a radio connection with London. Without you, we found it almost impossible to do so." "Of course, sir, right away." It was plain that the airwaves were still much disturbed after the battle, but on her 5th try, Sana managed to make contact with Leicester Square. Aiken beside her carefully held the colonel's dress saber propped up at an angle of 38 degrees. Gladiolus, are you there, Leicester Square? We appear to have won a decisive victory at Dollar and, as far as can be ascertained, subdued the northern monsters." "Delighted to hear it," said Leicester Square, "but Lord Ealing wants to know what about the book. Michael Scott's treatise. Has it been located yet? Over." "No, it has not been found. Our experts, Dr. Wren and Major Scanty, are here to tell you that it has almost certainly been destroyed in an avalanche. The cave where it was lodged has been swept down the side of Ben Cleach into the Burn of Sorrow. I will give you map references." The colonel did so. "No agency, either human or diabolical, can possibly recover the book now. It has been destroyed, or such is the opinion of Dr. Wren and Major Scanty, and it seems also that the principalities and powers of dark who have been raged against us, for they all seem to have packed up and left. Most of the monsters have been destroyed and no new ones are arriving. Over." "Then why are you loitering about in Dollar?" asked Leicester Square peevishly. "Pray make all possible speed back to London. There's still plenty of clearing up work to be done in the south. Over." "We have to stop in Manchester, sir, on the way. Over." "Whatever for?" "To, replace the square of turf in the centre of the football pitch. Over and out." And Colonel Clipspeak, looking fondly at Mrs. Church's complicated cross-stitch, which hung in majestic folds over his grand piano. And that is the end of the Cockatrice Boys. A good book, but a difficult book to read aloud. As you can tell, I struggled a lot with word anticipation. I don't feel like I normally do that with Joan Aiken. I don't go back and listen to my stuff enough to be sure of that, but it'll be a minute before another Joan Aiken book. We're about at the end of spooky season, and I think I will introduce something that will get everybody excited after I do the next short story, and I will see you in the next read aloud.